Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So today I'm doing my October mid-month wrap-up. I got a little behind on my wrap-ups, but I think I'm getting back on track now. It's only like the 19th, so it's not too bad. October's been weird, so I started my PhD properly. I'm now adjusting a lot to a new, very busy schedule. I'm quite behind on other booktube stuff, but I've not fallen behind on filming yet. I got ill, I'm still a little bunged up, so if I sound a bit weird, that's probably why. And I've been reading loads and loads of horror books. So far this month I've read 12 books so far. 2 of those I'm doing a vlog at the moment, which I started yesterday, so I'm not going to talk about those ones, and we'll see how I get through the other ones. But I'm mostly reading horror books, and surprisingly, and they're mostly ones from my TBR, which is really good. I'm about 5 books from finishing my Snakes and Ladders TBR, which was an ambitious one this month, so hopefully I can do it before the end of October. The first book I read was Bunny by Mona Awad. This wasn't actually on my TBR, this was like a random spontaneous pickup from my library. This book, I don't know what to rate, and I don't really know what I made of it. I did enjoy it. It's very weird. So I heard Books and Lala talk about it, I think, and a couple of other people have been talking about it as well. It's kind of hard to say what this book is about because so much of it is a surprise, but essentially it's about this girl who goes to college, and there are these groups of girls who are kind of in a cult, and they call each other Bunny. And our main character gets sucked into their world. There's a lot of surrealist fantasy. I would call this book magical realism. It's probably the best label for it. It's not really horror. I've heard it described as horror. There's not really any horrific elements apart from those that stem from the natural weirdness and craziness of this world. But I did really enjoy it. I don't know if it's my kind of thing. It's very hard for me to describe how I felt about this book, but I liked a lot of it, and I wasn't expecting pretty much any of it, which is impressive for a book to be that surprising. I'd recommend checking it out if you like magical realism stuff, or if you just want a really off-the-wall, creative, interesting read. It's definitely worth trying, but it's not going to be for everyone. And I think there's also some plot stuff which doesn't really get explained properly, which bothered me a bit. Like, you don't really know what is going on, even at the very end, so you do get kind of answers, but you won't get answers for everything, so if that's going to bother you, don't read this book either. But I did really enjoy it, and it was very unusual. Next book I read was a huge disappointment, and that is Like My Carnival, which is an anthology edited by Datlow. This is meant to be a horror anthology, and it really isn't. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. You can see that cover has got like a dead clown on it. So all these horror themed short stories are meant to be centred around circuses or fairgrounds, and they are. Only one of them has anything to do with clowns. Most of them aren't horror, which is kind of fine because Alan Datlow's anthologies are sort of like that. They're all billed as being horror, but very few of them actually are. But this was one of the least horror that I've read. A lot of the stories were just kind of dull. They didn't really use the carnival settings to their best advantage. Like, you can do a lot of great carnival horror, and I love carnival horror, but they were just kind of, it felt like the authors had stories they wanted to write and they just kind of set them at a carnival to get it in this anthology, which is a shame. But yeah, I wish I would like this more. I wish there'd been more cool clown stuff or other spooky stuff, but it just wasn't for me. It was just a bit dull and mediocre on the whole. The next book I read was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I listened to this on audiobook. I've been listening to all of the Harry Potter books on audiobook. I've never listened to the audiobooks before, and I'm doing a reread of them all with the Time Turner book club, so I'll link their Twitter down below if you want to take part. It's HalfBlood Prince this month, but I was a little bit late finishing Order of the Phoenix. I've also read HalfBlood Prince, but I'll talk about that in a second. Order of the Phoenix is the longest one. I was surprised by how much I didn't enjoy listening to this on audiobook. I've really liked listening to all the other ones, but something about this story just dragged, and I think it's because there's a lot going on in this book, and a lot of it is kind of unrelated to the other stuff going on in the plot. It did tend to drag a bit. It's like 26 hours, the audiobook, which is a lot. I didn't dislike it, but yeah, I don't know if this is my least favourite Harry Potter book. It might be. I still have to reread Deathly Hallows, but this one didn't do it for me in the same way as the others did. It's still good, it's still Harry Potter, but yeah, this also was the first book where I had lots of thoughts about the series. So I'm actually going to do a separate video where I just talk about my random Harry Potter thoughts and like quibbles with that kind of thing. But yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment. I might as well talk about it next. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So I listened to this on audiobook. In contrast to the last one, I absolutely loved this. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed rereading this book, because I think I said in my Ultimate Harry Potter tag that this was probably my least favourite book, and that is absolutely not true. It might even be my favourite apart from Prisoner of Azkaban, which will always be my favourite, just story-wise. This was so much fun. I loved it. I know it's got a lot more focus on characters, but I think that's why I liked it so much. I love how everyone gets a bit more of a personality. You get to see how different characters interact with each other. You get to know kind of what a daily life at Hogwarts is actually like. And that's something the series doesn't have a ton of. There's little moments here and there, but you don't really get a sense of... It kind of goes from school to mortal peril, and you don't really see what people are doing, living their lives. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. It might even be... I already said that. But yeah, I'm really excited to read Deathly Hallows next month and to finish the series again, because it always feels like a bit of a landmark. But yeah, Half-Blood Prince was so enjoyable. It really was. The next book I read was a really good one, and that is Frozen Charlotte by Alex Bell. This was a reread for me, and I had forgotten how good this book was. So this is a 5-star read for me, absolutely. I gave it 5 stars the first time I read it, and I gave it 5 stars again. This is super creepy. This is about a girl whose best friend essentially dies right at the start of the book, and he dies when they're using a Ouija board, and she contacts the ghost of her dead cousin whilst using this Ouija board, and then her best friend dies and she goes to this remote island where her cousin lived to kind of find out what happened to her, because she doesn't know how her cousin died or anything. And on this island there are many, many creepy people. She has 3 cousins. One is a tiny girl who is really creepy and terrified of bones. One is an older girl who's very sweet and very kind and welcoming, but seems to have a nasty side. And then one is a teenage boy who is quiet. He is ominously disfigured from a previous accident, and he really doesn't want his cousin there. So that's the kind of setup. Dolls is the other important plot element. There are these creepy dolls called Frozen Charlottes, and this whole legend, and it's just so good. I don't want to say too much more about the plot because it's really better if you go in blind. One thing I will say, it says right on the front of this book, it amuses me every time, that Zoella recommended this, because this was part of the Zoella book club several years ago when I actually watched Zoella. This book is so dark. I just love the idea that Zoella recommended this to all her like tween followers, because I cannot stress how dark this book is. It is a young adult book, but there is so much graphic violence, there's so many really, really creepy things that I can't go into detail about because it's all spoilers, but like, this is not a kids horror book. Do expect really creepy things because it is really, really creepy. But yeah, I just love the idea that Zoella recommended this because it doesn't seem on brand for her at all. But yeah, I really love this book. It's the perfect Halloween read. I would recommend checking it out if you like horror books, and it's actually a really good first horror book. It is very intense, but it's so interesting, and it's got creepy dolls, and it's great, and I love it. And just, yeah, read it now. It's so good. Following on from that, we actually have a DNF. and that is The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones. This was part of my Snakes and Ladders TBR, and I was really excited for this, but I got about 25% of the way through and I just couldn't read anymore. It's not a very long book, it's on Kindle Unlimited, it's like 100 and something pages. This is about a girl who survives like a horror, there's like a Michael Jackson killer, and she survives him, and then it says on the blurb she makes like her own court, like a homecoming court of other final girls, and then the Michael Jackson killer comes back or something. This book is written in a very, very weird style and it just didn't gel with me. It's written like you're on looking to a movie. It's not quite like a script, but it's hard for me to explain, so it'll be like you see the girl and like her top gets torn, as is typical of final girls, and like that's how it's written. And it was just, it didn't gel with me at all. It was really annoying to read, it made it difficult to kind of find out what was going on, and it was meta in a bad way. I normally really like meta horror books, but this one was just, yeah, it was just purely the writing style, and I wasn't a fan of that. So it's a shame because I was really excited to read this, but I couldn't get very far all the way through it. Thankfully, the next book I read was great, and that was #Murder Funding by Gretchen McNeil. This is the sequel to #Murder Trending, but I can pretty much talk about it without really spoiling #Murder Trending. So this is about a girl who... So #Murder Trending is about a prison, and in this world people get sent to this prison and it's like a reality TV show. And the prison hires 8 themed serial killers. I think it's 8, I could have the number wrong. And at some point when you're living your life on this reality TV show, you will be chosen by one of the serial killers and put into one of their themed death traps, and you will die that way. So the first book is about this girl who goes to this island. She's wrongly accused of murder, and she manages to actually escape one of these death traps, and that's never happened before, and it kind of shakes everything up. That's right at the start of the book, so I'm not spoiling that one. And then the second book is about a girl who's the daughter of one of the serial killers from the original island, or she's meant to be at least. And she gets told that she is this daughter, and she doesn't believe it, so she goes on this new reality TV show where they're hiring pretend serial killers, or they're hiring themed serial killers to pretend to kill people in a similar way to how they did on the first book. It's a little hard to explain, but basically she's auditioning to be a pretend serial killer, essentially, and she goes with this girl to try and work out if her mother really is a serial killer or not. This was really enjoyable. I gave it 4 stars. I think I liked the first one slightly better. My main problem with it is it was slow to get to the point, as I was when I was describing that plot. But it's only about halfway through that any horror type stuff actually starts happening. This is like light. It is a horror book, but it's humorous. It's light in tone. It's not very intense. And it gets to about, you're like 50% of the way through before anything horror related actually happens. And you can tell where the plot is going. It's not very hard to work out. So it's not too bad because it is well written and you get lots of character moments, and I was quite attached to the characters, but it's still a little bit of a slog to kind of get to that point. And then when the stuff starts happening again, it happens quite quickly and it feels like it's over quite quickly, and I feel like that's why you're reading the book, for that horror bit, which is the best bit of the whole book. It was still fantastically written. It had a lot of stuff from the first book that I really loved, like the tone and the creativity. Loads of cool elements, like all the serial killers, and the themes are really creative. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you've read the first one. I would read the first one first. You don't have to, but you get a lot of context that makes the second one make more sense. And also the first one's just great. So yeah, I'm really glad I picked this up, and I'm glad it didn't disappoint. The next book I read was another reread, and that is Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. This is a horror anthology of short stories. I gave this 5 stars last year, and I think it's still a 5-star anthology. I would maybe drop it down to 4.5 stars, but I don't know, because I still really loved it and I still loved all the stories. I mostly remembered all the stories, but there were several that surprised me because I'd forgotten either they were in the anthology or how they ended. It's a really solid horror anthology. I'm not going to say too much about it. I've got a blog review which I'll link down below if you want to read more detail on my thoughts of it. I wrote that last year when I read it. But if you're looking for a good horror anthology that's not too... all the stories are very cohesive with each other and you feel like they all belong together, which is really rare for horror anthologies, and I really liked that. So I definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't already. There's some really solid horror stories in it. The next book I read was another reread, and that was Final Girls by Riley Sager. I have not read this for about 3 years. This I gave 4.5 stars to. It might eventually become a 5-star read. I can't quite decide. This is a thriller book about a girl called Quinn, and she survived a massacre about 10 years ago now, I think. And there are 2 other women who also survived similar massacres, but they were unrelated massacres. And the press dubbed them Final Girls after the whole Final Girl trope. It's a horror trope. If you don't know what it is, just Google it. So these 3 women were kind of grouped together by the press. In the present day, one of the women has committed suicide, and this really shakes our main character. She doesn't remember her massacre incident. She's got huge blocks in her memory and no one's ever really believed that she doesn't remember it. And the other final girl finds our main character, and they've never met before, and she comes to see her about the other girl's suicide. And that's kind of all I'm going to say about the plot. It's really, really good. I love this book so much. It is a fantastic thriller. It is paced perfectly. You get great amounts of character development. Everything's really interesting. I think it's kind of... the twists aren't necessarily huge twists, but they're not unsurprising either. So it's just really solidly plotted and executed, and it's kind of like, it's not like the whole story's based around the twists, if that makes sense. It's like a really good story on its own. That being said, I did forget the ending. I actually thought I remembered what happened and I didn't, so I was surprised by a reread, which is fantastic. And again, this is perfect for autumn. It's set around Halloween, it's set in an autumn time, it's obviously a thriller, it's spooky, it's creepy, it's got good things. I really loved it. I love how it flips the final girl tropes on its head, and it kind of dissects them, but not in a really obvious way, it's in a really subtle way. And yeah, this is just a fantastically crafted thriller. Loads of people recommend it, and it's for good reason. I'm actually going to make that the last book I talk about now, because I've got 2 more that I was going to talk about, but I can tell that this video's gone on quite a bit already, so I will leave those for the end of month wrap up. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, it helps me out massively. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts are on them, if you think you're going to add any of them to your TBR, or if you want any more information about them, just ask. Let me know what you're reading for Halloween as well. I love Halloween and horror books and all that kind of thing, so if you're reading any really good spooky books or thriller books, just let me know. And I hope to see you next time.